two more on this before I move. How did the life-threatening shooting that you mentioned in 1995? How did that change you personally and professionally? You said the professional, you wanted to think a different way. Personally, how did that? And I'd still, if you want to go a little more into professionally, but how did that life-threatening shooting in 1995 affect you personally and professionally?
Yeah, well, honestly, it changed my views in regards to there are some communities out there that are poisoned, plagued by bad individuals.
Yeah.
And in order for us to make those communities safer, law enforcement has a big role. It wasn't a situation where we were just walking down the street and hurting anybody or fighting anybody. Yeah. We were walking down the street during a
Is there anything better than a trip getting ready?
Nope.
For a long journey where our podcast released a new epi, searching for a fade fiend, new fixation. Giving this a subscribe is the same sensation. Started with the day ones, they gave us fuel to support the season. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here for a reason. Notification bells, tap some friends, all to let you know. Check your Bluetooth, connect, talk your wisdom out.
Welcome in, everyone. This episode, Undercover Wisdom, Harrison's Law of Leadership, with our guest, Rodney Harrison. Mr. Harrison, thank you for joining us today. How are things? How are you?
I'm good. It's my pleasure for being on your show. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, happy to have you. You and I met. I was instantly taken on a journey in my mind. That's an exceptional gentleman. So I accosted you. I think you were trying to make your exit, and I accosted you. So I appreciate your patience as well. Shows a patient person. You know, sometimes when you're done, and you want to leave. So that's a little bit. I'll do a full intro to let everyone gain a little bit about you. But I wanted them to know just kind of a little bit of our interaction, a little peek behind the scenes. So for everyone else, today's guest is someone whose career reads like a masterclass in courage, leadership, and public service. Rodney Harrison spent more than 32 years in law enforcement, rising from a New York Police Department cadet to the highest uniformed rank in the department. He's led undercover operations, solved homicides, commanded precincts, rebuilt community trust during moments of national security scrutiny, and made history as the first Black chief of detectives in New York City. As Suffolk County's police commissioner, he launched the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force, helping crack one of the region's most notorious cold cases. Now he brings his expertise to CBS News and to organizations across the country through Hall and Harrison Solutions. This conversation is about leadership under pressure, decision-making when the stakes are life and death, and what it really takes to guide complex organizations through crisis. Rodney Harrison is here, and we're diving deep. Mr. Harrison, this is pretty exciting for me. I'm looking forward to this.
Let's do it.
I want to start early career and undercover work. When you look back at your early days as a cadet and undercover officer, what moments shaped your understanding of policing the most?
Yeah, so prior to me going to law enforcement, prior to me going to the NYPD, I actually had a displeasure with law enforcement. I had negative interactions growing up in Jamaica, Queens. I've had situations where I was falsely arrested. These are some of the incidents that I share in my book. And the one thing that I will say that changed my mindset is the human side of cops, and how do we take this position in law enforcement? And, you know, everybody hears about law enforcement, you start thinking about, you know, arrests and shootouts and a host of other things, which, you know, unfortunately that comes with the job. But what's the other aspect of it, and regarding giving back, helping people, getting people back on their feet and mentoring the youth, which was another passion of mine. And, you know, I know you don't want to get too deep into how we met, but just that time at the basketball clinic with my daughter and being able to talk to the youth there about, you know, basketball and, you know, how I trained my daughters and how they all were playing on the highest level of the sport that they chose is what it's all about. And that was one of the things that kind of gravitated me to going to law enforcement, making sure that I am given an opportunity to mentor people that look like me, try to help people through difficult situations, and just let people know if you ever come to a situation where there's a crossroad, I'm here to give you that advice to help you make the appropriate and right decision.
Now, you knew we were going to get there. I bet you guessed in your mind, I bet you're going to get to undercover stuff as fast as possible. But, you know, it's big, you know, it's always on TV. It's always for us. But what did undercover work teach you about human behavior that stayed with you throughout your career?
Yeah, so a couple of things about undercover work, which it's probably the most dangerous job when it comes to law enforcement and policing, because you're dealing with a criminal element. You have to find ways to change your personality, the person that you are, to get people to indulge you or engage you in committing some type of criminal act. And it's not easy. And another situation where in 1995, my partner was shot during a buy and bust operation while we were undercovers. And, you know, these are the things that change you when you see your partner possibly losing his life during an undercover operation. And it propelled me to make sure that I put myself in position to make change in policing when it comes to going up in rank, seeing what I could do for undercovers in that do this dangerous job, and making sure that we protect them going forward. A lot of things, unfortunately, that we do in law enforcement is very gun-ho instead of being done in a strategic way. And after that shooting incident when my partner was shot, and I had to notify his wife that, you know, his name was Michael Stoney, he may not make it. It really was a terrifying day in my life. And it also changed me in regards to being a lot more mature about this profession in law enforcement. And, you know, you could always be a detective and take orders, or you go up in rank and give orders. And that situation changed my trajectory in the NYPD to have a different mindset to, I want to be the person that's giving the orders.
Yeah. Can you walk us through the mindset required to operate effectively and safely in those undercover environments, especially when you got to make that switch? As soon as you said that, I thought, man, I might have a little twitch. Like, you know, personally, I hate it when a person does this, and I probably have a tell. So you gotta send all those tells out. So that mindset, what mindset is required to operate effectively and safely in those undercover environments?
So you think about tactics, you think about safety, you think about strategy, you think about a lot of different things when it comes to knowing that people that there's an investigation into, and you got to take a look at, you know, is this person a violent individual? Is this person just trying to make a dollar? You know, there's a lot of moving parts when a undercover operation goes into process. It's not a cookie cutter situation where it's always the same way for every single engagement. You have to do a background check on somebody. You have to find out a little bit about their criminal history, their family life, things of that nature before you try to attempt to engage an individual that's doing anything from selling drugs to, you know, small quantity to large amounts, selling guns that could harm so many different communities, doing identity theft and selling other types of counterfeit items that unfortunately a lot of people that are unknown of how it works are now become vulnerable. So the undercover world is crucial in policing because of the work that undercovers do. You're able to go after the worst of the worst individuals that are doing and having a lifestyle of this criminal activity. Sometimes it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's situations where the hair on your neck raises up. But there's other times, you got to be confident. You got to be able to find a way to get that individual that's ruining that community to buy into you being not a law enforcement official, and then work your way into engaging them to see if they're going to, I guess, depending on what the crime that they're committing, get them to get you involved in what they're participating in.
Very serious topic. But in my mind, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, okay, so how do you get close to me? Well, I'm thinking of all the things that I'm into. And then, yeah, I mean, if he's a cool cat and we talk, I got an amazing big guard dog at home. So I don't have everybody in my house, but that doesn't mean you can't get close, right? Like you could be at the court every time I'm at the court because you kind of know my schedule. You could end up at a lot of my kids' sporting events, I guess, and be like, yeah, man, well, we was out. I was watching Rodney's kid over there, but I got this free time. Didn't know you was going to be here. Your kid playing today. Yeah. And then you could sit there and talk to me the whole time on the sidelines, I bet. And I probably wouldn't even think that. I like all that was popping in my head. Wow. Rodney, that's amazing. That's amazing. Just to think about it. Two more on this before I move on. How did the life-threatening shooting that you mentioned in 1995, how did that change you personally and professionally? You said the professional, you wanted to think a different way. Personally, how did that, and I'd still, if you want to go a little more into professionally, but how did that life-threatening shooting in 1995 affect you personally and professionally?
Yeah, well, honestly, it changed my views in regards to, there are some communities out there that are poisoned, plagued by bad individuals.
Yeah.
And in order for us to make those communities safer, law enforcement has a big role. It wasn't a situation where we were just walking down the street and hurting anybody or fighting anybody. Yeah. We were walking down the street during an undercover operation trying to buy drugs, and the person just shot my partner. That could have been anybody else as well. And for people who carry guns in our communities, we have to figure out a way to prioritize making some of these dangerous communities safer. And if it has to be a buy and bust operation, the deployment of more officers, making sure we have identified individuals that are consistently causing trouble in a neighborhood, we have to make sure precision-wise we identify these individuals and figure out a way we could get them off the street and make that neighborhood safer, which is very underappreciated. It really is. And when you see your partner shot, when you see shootings all the time, when you see a situation where DeBell Gardner was a 1-year-old that was shot in Bedside, Brooklyn, when you see Brendan Hendricks has just signed a scholarship to go to St. John's, is killed in a crossfire. When you see other youth that are killed by unfortunate gunplay, it really changed your views on things that we need to do better as law enforcement, as well as partnership with community, to work harder to make sure people are safer.
Okay. Sir, I lied. I lied, but that's your fault. I had one more I wanted to ask, but I want to dive back in just for a quick second on what you just said there, is there like a timeline? Listen, we all got bosses, and maybe you have been trying to build some trust and it's taken you 2 weeks, 3 weeks. These are just numbers that came up. So bear with me. And your boss said, I was only going to give you 2 weeks. We're on the third week. Hey, you're going to have to fly or you're going to have to fall off the building. I don't know how they would tell you that you better figure this out. Is that your gut? Or sometimes are people going to escalate you, put you on the spot, and now you gotta fling the Hail Mary? Does that timeline get to be made by you since you're where the rubber meets the road?
So you mean timeline regarding timeline of
building trust?
Building trust with who? I apologize.
So if I probably should have laid that out. So if the scenario is that, let's say, hope I'm using it right, a buy and bust. So this guy Donato sells out the back trunk of his Cadillac, and you've been showing up at all. Like I said earlier, you've been showing up at all my kids' events. Somehow you in the gym when I'm in the gym, so we throw up shots. I'm feeling real comfortable, but I seem to be a little standoffish. So you don't think I'm there yet for you to be like, yo, I just came into like $10,000. First thing I want to get is a gap. And then maybe I'll be like, oh, you trying to do so that timeline for that weirdly episode 6 of a morning, of a series example that I gave you.
Yeah. So I'll say it again. There's no cookie cutter situation. There's not an exact timeline. There's not hey, you got 24 hours. Hey, you got 6 months. Hey, it all depends on where the investigation is going, what's being done, what's being seen, what's being observed, and a host of other things come into place regarding a decision into an investigation. But there's not hey, you have 72 hours that you know what you're referring to. You're referring to movies. You're referring to television shows.
Yes.
And I just want to share this with everybody. Things, and with all due respect, I love watching cop shows myself, but it's not reality.
Wow. Yeah, our realities are so convoluted. But I'm glad I did ask that question, because that leads into my last question. What do people misunderstand most about the realities of undercover narcotics work?
I guess you got to ask people in the community and see what they feel about it. I know myself. I think it's a very needed investigative tool when it comes to protecting communities. So, other people may have a misconception on how it's being utilized. The one thing that I will share is this: undercover work will make your neighborhood safer. Let's make sure that that's very crystal clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. Investigations and detective work. You solved multiple homicides early in your career. What investigative principles became foundational for you?
Engagement, working with people, being able to communicate, being able to listen, being able to have the skill set of talking. A lot of people that do investigations just don't have the patience. You got to be patient. You got to be able to talk. You got to be able to listen. You got to be able to develop relationships. You got to get people to feel comfortable. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't trust the law, be it right, wrong, or indifferent. One of my skill sets when I was an investigator was to build relationships, make sure people feel comfortable, in sharing information. A lot of times people are victims of crimes and people see it, but they don't want to cooperate. They don't want to talk. And what are you telling that victim? That you don't care about them. That mindset of snitches get stitches, but yet at the same time, there's a victim there. So one of the things that we have to do better in law enforcement, and I think we're in a better place, is developing those relationships, making sure we're engaged in the community, make sure there's a trust factor so people feel comfortable to come forward, especially if this is a situation where it's a violent crime, as in a homicide or something of that nature.
Yeah. How do you build trust within communities that maybe hesitant to engage with investigators?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times the first time someone from the public has to have an engagement with law enforcement is when that incident occurs. I'm a big fan of, we need to get to know the community prior to that incident. So if something does occur, that relationship is already there. So we know Ms. Jones, we know Mr. Johnson, we know the business owner over here, the house of worship leader, the people at the educational institution. There has to be relationships. So when an incident does occur, it's not stranger meets stranger, or law enforcement meet this individual. Imagine if you had a situation where that relationship was already there, that comfort level. People are not speculating that cops are bad or whatever the case may be, and they know that police officer, there'll be a comfort level for people to share information, to come forward, to really hold people accountable.
What separates a good detective from a great one?
I was asked this question before, and I think because of the day and age of technology, a lot of investigators like to do things behind the desk. I think in order to be a great detective, you have to get from behind the desk. You got to get out in the street. You got to be able to, kind of get a sense of the area, and as well as work on relationships, kind of what I stated earlier. But good detectives know the technology that they have access to. Great detectives know the technology, but also work on that human side and have relationships with the communities that they're sworn to protect and serve.
How did your time leading detective squads influence your later leadership roles?
Yeah, that's a good question as well, because, I did multiple positions in the NYPD. But I will say this, some of the ups and downs that I observed and learned being an investigator helped me later on when I went out to Suffolk County and was involved with that serial killer case. Mm-hmm. That experience allowed me to make sure that there were partnerships, that we had all of our law enforcement agencies working together, having weekly meetings and making sure certain things were done. You don't know these types of steps unless you've been in those shoes. And because of my NYPD experience, and because I worked in multiple investigative units, because I solved homicides, because I oversaw multiple investigations in different parts of New York City, I went into Suffolk County, and I was able to ask the right questions to get us in a place to identify a person of interest. So yeah, it was very, very beneficial, and it helped me a lot.
That makes me feel like a little bit back to what you said about building relationships, being understood, because I think you could have came in like, I'm the NYPD, right? I'm that guy. I got all that experience. And then in Suffolk County, people don't even want to hear you, right? It's like, oh, here he comes, big time in us. I think that helped you, that you understood not to try to step on toes. May not even be saying that correctly, but it's all about how you deliver your experience. Do you agree with that? Am I on the right path?
So, one of the things I've always taken pride in, and yes, the NYPD, I say we're the Yankees, the biggest police department in the country, protecting the biggest city in the country. And you just learn so much being in the NYPD, where NYPD, you take an NYPD official and put them anywhere, and they're going to succeed because of the experience. But because I always learned from some quality leaders in NYPD, the level of professionalism, not letting this job go to your head, not trying to be egotistical, helped me transition to Suffolk County and remain humble, but yet at the same time understand that there has to be partnerships and we have to work together. Listen, at the end of the day, Was there a little bit of a chip on my shoulder? Of course there was, but I also didn't show it unless I needed to. And there have been times where I had to cut people, where I had to like move people from certain positions. That's the NYPD way. Was it favorable? Did I step on some toes? Did I maybe have people not talk to me? Hey, it comes with the territory. But the truth of the matter is this: I had a job I had to do, and the job out in Suffolk County was to implement the reform plan that was requested of me. Take a look at this serial killer case that was, over 10 years old. Suffolk County was struggling with diversity. So I wanted to see what can we do regarding diversifying that police department. And I was able to work with a couple of people in Suffolk County that we were able to get more people of color to take the test and join that department. So yeah, I had a mindset of I got 2 years out here. I want to make a change. I want to make a difference. I want to make this change the perception of Suffolk County. I think I was able to accomplish that. And the reason why that was because of my 30 years in NYPD.
Leadership and command roles. I want to go there. As you moved into supervisory roles, what leadership lessons came the hardest and what came naturally?
Well, what came the hardest is, and I preach this while I do my speaking engagements across the country with my company called Hall & Harrison Solutions, where I try to tell people you have to know your personnel. And that's not just law enforcement, that's in any walk of life. People sometimes go through struggles, and underneath the roof, they don't want people to know exactly what's going on, be it a health issue with a family member, to financial strains, to be it even something to the fact where there's marital struggles that may be going on. And now they are asked to come to work and still perform at a higher level. I think it's important as a supervisor, and once again, this is not just for law enforcement. I think this is something that all walks of life need to take a closer look at. What are your people that work for you? What are they going through? And how can you help them get through such a difficult time? Do you push them as hard as you should, knowing that they're going through the struggle, or do you find a way to kind of pull back and just help them along through this difficult situation? And that was one of the law enforcement leadership things that I learned, because I made my own mistakes when I was commanding precincts, trying to push my officers harder and not understanding that everybody is not always in a great place in life. And yeah, we need to sometimes pull back and realize that certain people underneath the roof with their family or some other thing may be going on that just may not be on the same page as others. And you got to find a way to get them that help so they can get back on their feet.
What does effective leadership look like in high visibility, high pressure environments? We want to start from scratch. We want to know from you. I'm not going to make any mentions of TV shows. Effective leadership.
Try not to crumble under pressure. No matter, once again, I could sit here and say this is a law enforcement, but this is in all walks of life. There's going to be times where the walls are closing in. And you have to make sure that you're not losing your composure. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a mistake, to listen to your subordinates. A lot of times when you're in leadership positions, you think you're the smartest person in the room. I was a big advocate of listening to the people that work for me, hearing their views, coming up with decisions as a team. And when you're trying to make decisions by yourself, when you're trying to control everything, you're not allowing people to give you input, maybe even tell the emperor that his clothes is off, you're destined for failure. You got to make sure you are willing to listen to the people around you, stay composed. When the walls are closing in, stay focused. You may have to put a little extra work in, but find a way to navigate through such difficult times. And in law enforcement, unfortunately, difficult times come a little bit more than expected.
Yeah. How did you approach crime reduction strategies in precincts with deep community trust challenges?
I'll go back to situations where you got to have engagements and you got to explain to people, this is what we're doing. And I made that mistake multiple times. Once again, this is another thing that I shared in the book where, you sometimes you make decisions in regards to policing strategies.
Yeah.
And if you don't share those strategies with the community, they're going to be frustrated. They're going to be concerned. They're going to be angry. You have to make sure that you're developing a situation where you're explaining to your constituents in that jurisdiction of exactly what you're doing and what you're doing going forward, and making sure that there's feedback and explanation. And if there is a situation where there is a certain situation where officer is unprofessional, you want to hear about it. You want to have an open door. You want people to come in and tell you about things. And as long as you're being transparent, engaging, holding your officers accountable, those situations where you're conducting law enforcement in difficult communities, it becomes a whole lot smoother when you're working side by side, hand in hand, making sure you're addressing the issues that are unfortunately plaguing that area.
Yeah. I know I have a couple more in this I want to do, but because I think this is applicable throughout all places of our lives. You even mentioned that. So I'd like to finish these last two. What do you learn about managing large teams with diverse personalities, backgrounds, and motivations?
Yeah, so the NYPD is minority majority type of department. Suffolk County, unfortunately, is not. And one of the things that I think is important is recruitment from different communities that can help build relationships and trust in the brown and black communities. I thought that was always very, very important. So, and to get to the question is, it's good to have a diverse police department, organization, agency, unit, precinct, but you got to continue to make sure you're going into certain communities and sharing the positives about going into policing. I know I shared with you earlier that I had negative interactions with law enforcement. And the thing that changed my mind was a cadet corps program that, once again, as I was able to see the human side of the police officers, that kind of changed my mindset. Having diverse police departments is extremely important, but it doesn't stop. You got to make sure you're continuing to recruit, show people the positives. Unfortunately, we live in a world of social media, and the thing that goes viral are the negative interactions, which of course can be a deterrent for people to want to come in this department. But if you have the right diverse people in place, they can help with recruitment, applicant processing, and making sure that transition into law enforcement goes a lot smoother. In Suffolk County, there was some pushback, but I was blessed to have a partner by the name of Risco Minchin-Lewis that was also passionate about diversifying the police department and making sure we figured out ways to get more people to apply to a department that might have had a little bit of perception of some racial overtones and some other concerns that wasn't necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And we had to make sure that if you heard it from her, you heard it from me, you heard it from the right people, then that maybe will change people's minds. And listen, are there issues in law enforcement? Absolutely. There's issues in all types of professions. I don't care what it is, the medical field, education, sports, arts, no matter where it is, there's going to be issues. But the more diversified an institution, the better off of getting more people from diverse groups to join that type of institution.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you maintain morale during periods of intense public scrutiny?
Oof. It's not easy. The one thing that I was very adamant about is getting out of One Police Plaza, going, seeing the cops in the streets, shaking their hands, putting my hand on their shoulder, say, yo, listen, I got your back. Keep working hard. I see what you're doing. Addressing the roll calls. The cops want to see the leadership people, coming to the roll calls, meeting them in the streets, seeing them in their cars, and just letting them know, man, listen, I appreciate what you're doing. Words matter when it comes to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And getting leaders out there in an agency and making sure that you're talking to the cops, hearing their opinions, hearing their thoughts, giving them a voice, that helps build morale. And just allowing cops to vent, but yet at the same time making sure that they're putting their family first. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I was always very, very proud of in my time frame, in my 30 years in NYPD. As much as I was able to have a blessing and rise through the ranks, I never put the job in front of my family. And that there kept me at a level, a balanced level of being a good cop, being able to go through work through some very, very difficult times, but yet at the same time, when I got home, being able to take care of my family, which is the most important thing to me.
Yeah. Community trust and crisis moments. You were assigned to Staten Island after the Eric Garner incident. What did rebuilding trust look like on the ground?
So there was a lot of frustration. A lot of people had some concerns to try to figure out how do we make sure this situation doesn't happen again. And it goes back to what I've been saying since we started. You got to have engagement. You got to talk. You got to allow people to share their frustrations, change policies, make sure we're putting things in place, being transparent, holding cops accountable if need be, and letting them be more involved with policing. Making sure that they have a say-so regarding certain things that we have in place when it comes to policies and change policies that kind of fit their concerns. And I think if you're a person from Staten Island after Eric Garner to any other incident that happened, I think sometimes in law enforcement, we have to change our policies to make sure that the communities that are hurting understand that we want to work with you. And if it has to be a certain situation that makes the job a little bit more difficult, then we have to do as such.
What role does transparency play in repairing strained relationships between police and communities?
Humongous. If you cover up anything, I don't care what it is, but if you're covering up law enforcement, you're not letting the communities that you're protecting and serving seeing certain things that you're doing on a regular basis, be it access to our patrol guide, to knowing about cops that commit some type of misconduct, knowing about the penalties that may go along with it, to just having day-to-day conversations about crime concerns and some of the strategies going forward. That transparency is extremely important. And you got to think about it. It just brings a level of comfort to anybody who is having questions about something. So just imagine if you go to your wife is pregnant and you go see a doctor and you say, hey, doc, I want to find out about the situation about my wife's being sick. And I can't talk about it. Are you going to trust that doctor?
Nah.
Hey, your kid goes to school and you want to find out, why they're struggling in school. Teacher, hey, we're not going to talk about why they're bringing home C's and D's. I mean, well, what type of school is this? Like, transparency is important in everything that we do. And it's important that in law enforcement, where law enforcement could be a lot more detrimental, you have to make sure you're pulling the curtain back, letting people see how operations are working, having those conversations, allowing them to be part of the conversation, and making sure there's a consistent engagement, and not just with the leadership, also with the cops. Implementation of neighborhood policing back in 2017, 2018 changed the NYPD, because it wasn't just the community affair cops that were doing the engagement. It was the regular patrol cops that were getting out their cars and introducing themselves, giving out business. Hey, do you have a problem? You give me a call on this number. Hey, Mr. Jones, how are you? What time is your store closing? Hey, the principal at the school. Hey, I heard you have some issues here. How can we help? That level of transparency, that level of engagement, it 1 + 1 = 2. It just makes things a whole lot safer, and it builds trust, and it helps make policing better for the communities that we're serving.
Yeah. How do you balance operational needs with community expectations during those crisis moments then?
Yeah, and crisis situations come in all types of sizes. You know, you can talk about the George Floyd protests, to COVID, to 9/11, to a host of other things. And you got to try to balance that budget and try to navigate, you know, what do we have to do to make sure we get through this very, very difficult time. Unfortunately, when you're in the outside looking in, you may not understand it, but inside a department, there's a lot of work regarding what do we do operationally to stop protests that are turning into riots from occurring? How do we stop cops from retiring because of the fear of COVID? How do we deal with a situation when there's a terrorist attack on our city, and we have to conform to some type of rescue mission, working with our other agencies? So there's a lot of different scenarios that law enforcement is faced with when it comes to operational demands. A lot of things we have to do kind of on a fly, and then we try to figure out as we go along. There are times that we ask for the community's patience and ask them to, you know, understand that this is a very, very difficult time, and certain things that we might have had in place before, we may not be able to do it right now because of some of the strains that we have operational. But the most important thing is having those conversations and letting them know that we may have to adjust certain things because of the strain that the department may be going through during a certain time frame.
What advice would you give leaders navigating public criticism while trying to implement change?
Politics of policing is really a difficult thing. And, you know, at the end of the day, leadership, the most important thing to us is how do we protect our communities? We have to be in a place of strength and understanding and figure out what's the best thing for the police officers to be effective. What's the best thing for the police officers to be able to protect? What's the best thing to have the cops be able to go home at the end of their tour? And a lot of times people have frustrations with policies with police officers when it comes to advancing in technology, thinking that we are doing too much imposing into the communities, which is not the case. In order for police departments to make sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day, sometimes there needs to be situations of technology, sciences, and other things that people may not understand, but that are beneficial to doing what we do best. This is just safety. And I know it's something that, you know, sometimes people get frustrated about when it comes to a situation. I'll just throw an example out there. Facial recognition.
Right.
And they'll say, oh, they're using facial recognition because they want to try to trap you, this and the other. No, we want to use facial recognition because people are committing crimes, violent crimes, murders, shooting people, rapes, robberies, and all we have is a face. And that face has allowed us an opportunity to hold that person accountable because of the right technology. And a lot of times people, they don't take the victims into the equation. And if you have a family member that was a victim of, I'll just use a heinous crime of a rape, you want that person to be arrested, and you want that department to use the appropriate technology to apprehend that individual, to get him off the street before he commits another crime to somebody else. And that's where you see a lot of struggles when it comes to communities having a concern about over policing or adding too much technology. The truth of the matter is this: police departments, we got to make sure we're strengthening that trust, but the communities also need to understand, in order for us to make you safer, technology is coming, and it's really has done a lot of things in making so many different communities safer going forward.
Your executive leadership time in the NYPD. As chief of patrol, what were the biggest challenges of overseeing citywide uniformed operations?
Creating neighborhood policing. That was a big change in the NYPD. Rolling it out to 77 precincts, and we don't just do it one time. We kind of do it bit by bit. We pilot it out to different precincts and get everybody to understand that everybody's going to be advancing in this new philosophy, which is having all the cops engage with the community. And it worked. It was successful. We got crime down. We got people to cooperate. Police, community people knew the cops that were assigned to their steady sector. They were neighborhood coordination officers, having meetings and engagements and working with community leaders to make sure things were being addressed, from somebody walking a dog off a leash to a robbery pattern. No matter what the case may be, we were able to fix problems with a partnership in neighborhood policing. But that was a very, very difficult thing I had to go through regarding getting neighborhood policing rolled out, piloted out to each one of the precincts, have community meetings with each of the 77 commands, and let the community know at these meetings, hey, you're going to have a cop assigned to you. You need to get to know them.
God, 77 commands?
77 commands.
Okay, so then what did the rollout of neighborhood policing teach you about long-term cultural change?
The cultural change was one where, and I'll talk about internally first, there was a struggle. Everybody in law enforcement wasn't necessarily diving into this new philosophy. A lot of times you have had cops that didn't necessarily have that mindset of engaging with the community. Once you have leadership pushing it down to the patrol cops and making sure that they understood that this is important, to the police commissioner, to the chief of department, that change was hard, and it didn't come overnight. It's like turning a big ship in the water. It was very, very slow turning, but we were able to turn it around and get that ship going in a different direction, to get the cops to understand the investment in having a role of community engagement. And it panned off. Listen, it wasn't easy. It was difficult, but we were able to get them to buy into the philosophy.
Becoming the first Black chief of detectives was historic. What did that moment mean to you?
It meant a lot, because in 175-year history, being the first Black chief of detectives means I'm leaving a legacy. I'm also in a position where I may be in the most prominent position in law enforcement in the country. Being the chief of detectives of the NYPD, I can't think of any other positions out there that are better than that. And just being able to lead to be biased, say the greatest detectives in the world in a lot of the investigations and solving crimes and bringing comfort to families. There was no better feeling. And, being a leader is one thing, but people don't understand. I also learned as well. I learned from the detectives that, certain investigative steps. And as much as I was a detective, as much as I was a sergeant detective, I was chief of detectives in Brooklyn North. I was still learning from investigators regarding, certain strategies that they put in place to investigate a crime and bring that comfort to a family that might have lost a loved one to some type of gun violence, or to survivors of a sex crime or things of that nature. It was really a great learning life lesson for me, a career lesson, excuse me, for me during that position as chief of detectives.
Yeah. How did you approach modernizing investigative units across homicide, special victims, narcotics, and intelligence?
Well, I talked about the advancement in technology. I talked about the advancement in sciences and DNA and other things that really helped out investigators. The difficult part was being able to get the investigators to understand that these types of technology are at their fingertips. What happens here is when you're dealing with detectives with over 20 years on, they're old school. You do things a certain way. We were in the NYPD, there's always some type of new advancement regarding how we can do investigations better, more thoroughly, more cohesive. And just getting the investigators a training to understand these new types of technology, I think made us incredible advance in regards to investigations. When you live in the stone age of investigation, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. If you use the right technology, the right sciences to be able to identify a pattern, a robbery pattern, a burglary pattern, being able to use the resources around you, you're able to protect more communities and stop people from being victimized over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. What leadership principles guided you as chief of department during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, that was a tough time, and it was not just the coming out of COVID, but we also lost the trust of our residents because of the George Floyd incident. And that's New York City. Listen, something happens anywhere in this country, it's going to have an effect on New York City. And we had to take it bit by bit, step by step, get the cops back to full duty, make sure we had the appropriate manpower. And then, listen, there was a time frame where crime was spiking. A lot of people were wearing masks and covering themselves up to commit violent crimes. We had a lot of engagements in our ComStat meetings to make sure that everybody within the department was learning from one another regarding how to patrol anything from transit to we call public service areas, but housing areas to patrol. And just making sure that everybody understood that, listen, just because we're in a difficult time right now, we're going to continue to work, we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to come up with different strategies to make sure we're protecting the residents of New York City. And listen, it took a while. It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But with the right strategies, with the right leaders in the NYPD, with the passion of the cops being able to fight through such a difficult time and being resilient, I think we were able to get New York City back on its feet.
Suffolk County and Gilgo Beach case. Oof. What were your priorities when you stepped into the role of Suffolk County Police Commissioner?
Taking a look at this Gilgo Beach investigation and seeing what we could do to rejuvenate the case was one of my priorities. The governor's office asked all the police departments in the state of New York to implement a reform plan, which the county executive really held my hand to task to make sure that that was being implemented as well. And that concludes rolling out of body-worn cameras, how we respond to people that are going through a mental health crisis, implementing community engagement, and a host of other things. We had a portal, a transparency hub, which kind of allowed people to take a closer look at, our police department when it came to stopping individuals and making sure we weren't over policing in certain communities. So there was a lot of different things that were thrown my way, but the thing that I was most passionate about was this Gilgo Beach investigation and how can we get somebody identified.
Yeah. How did you structure the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force to break through years of investigative stagnation?
Yeah, just reaching out to the law enforcement partners out there, which, I reached out to the FBI, and once again, this is in the book, The Commissioner, where the FBI didn't want to work with us. They were thrown off kind of like a quasi task force prior to my inception there. They were brought back in, but not necessarily given an opportunity to look at the files. And then when I called them to come work with us again, they told me no. So we're not working with you anymore. And we've had our chances to work with you, but every time we try to work with you, we don't have access to the case. So I told them, listen, there's a new guy in town. I came from the NYPD. We were successful so many times with having task force and working with the FBI. You're not going to have those worries anymore. And I supplied them with an office space over by the Suffolk County Community College. I reached out to the state police, asked them to partner up. Reached out to the sheriff's office with Errol Toulon. They provided some people. We asked for the district attorney's office to be involved, and the role of Ray Tierney and his people were extremely instrumental through the judicial process. And we had a team in place along with the members from the homicide squad of Suffolk County. So it was a little bit of bargaining, a little bit of moving some pieces around that they weren't used to, but we were able to get the task force up and running and have weekly meetings to make sure things were done appropriately as discussed from the week before.
Yeah. What leadership decisions proved most critical in ultimately identifying and arresting Rex Heuermann?
So one of the investigators from the state police, and one of the problems that I come to learn that Suffolk County Police Department didn't have access to all types of databases. They were a little bit, we'll use the word antiquated when it came to having all the appropriate databases. And that's why there was an important need to have the FBI and all the other agencies involved to take a look at this case. But one of the investigators from the state police had a humongous role and conducted a TLO check based upon some information that was involved in the case from the prior administrations. And one thing led to another, and this little nugget led to an individual named Rex Heuermann that lived in Massapequa Park. Massapequa Park was one of the locations where we had some cell site hits. So it kind of made sense that this check led to an individual that lived in that area, as well as worked in Midtown Manhattan, where the other cell site hits were coming from. So it kind of made sense. I mean, listen, we still had to do more of a thorough investigation, but that state police officer was absolutely the game changer in this investigation.
What does that case teach us about persistence, collaboration, and investigative discipline?
Well, it teaches us that, you really shouldn't do cases within your own agency. If you work with other partners and other agencies that have access to other things, you'd be surprised how much work you can do. And there were certain times while I was in the NYPD where we created task force and we were able to solve a lot of cases. It's a blueprint. It only makes sense. Like, you know, in policing sometimes, especially when it comes to investigations, there's egos. You know, people think that they could do things by themselves. I think that if you could tell investigators to leave the egos at the door, this is bigger than you. We got to make sure that we're working together as a common goal to identify somebody that possibly might have killed 11 people that were discovered on Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, then so be it. But I think one of the things that kind of slowed the investigation down might have been the egos within the Suffolk County Police Department. And once we were able to clear those crumbs off the table and make sure we started partnering up and working together, you saw a difference. You saw a step in the right direction, and it paid off.
I tell you, this is this was exactly what I thought. Rodney Harrison's career. This is the exciting, memorable podcast that I started doing this for. It's a reminder for us that leadership isn't about titles. It's about responsibility, courage, consistency when the spotlight is brightest and the pressure is highest. His insights on crisis management, we talked about community trust tonight, organizational readiness are lessons every leader can use, no matter the field. He did a great job of explaining that this was not just NYPD law enforcement dependent. So Rodney, thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom. And everyone listening, if today's conversation gave you something to think about, stay curious, stay prepared, and stay ready to lead. That's what Mr. Harrison has told us today. I really thank you for coming on, Rodney. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Have a great night. Thanks for talking with Donato.